And I want to welcome everybody to this webinar panel on emotional health in school. And we're really excited to be here with you. We have, as some of you may know, we've just opened the Idea Center for Educators on campus, or through the Neufeld Institute. And so we've created kind of our own campus of a place to gather resources and be able to help bring some insight and put it into practice for you. So there's ideas there is recordings, there's resources. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but this is our first one together. We are the leadership team, the four of us, and so we're just going to introduce ourselves first, and then we will each share a piece on emotional health in school, and then we will come back at the end all together and address some of the questions. All right, so, all right, I've just tried to change that now, so it should work now in the chat. It didn't stick the first time, so try that and see if we can get that to work. And first, I'll just introduce myself. So I am Tamara Strijack, and I am the Academic Dean of the Neufeld Institute, and I also am a counselor and a consultant. I work with children, adolescents, and adults, and I've worked in a school setting for many years as a school counselor. And I also teach child development classes for teachers and counselors. It's one of my favorite things, is equipping others who are working with children and have a real heart for that. So, and I have two of my own children who are now emerging adults at 19 and 21. So it's a little bit about me, and I will pass it to Eva.
Great. Thanks, Tamara. So my name is Eva Gosztonyi. I am a school psychologist and have been in the field for so many years, it's kind of hard to even say it. 45 years I've worked in schools as a school psychologist. I live in Montreal, Quebec, and I had the immense honor and pleasure of inviting Gordon to speak in Montreal. And so I've been involved with his material for close to 20 years. I'm on the faculty of the Institute and one of the senior faculty members right there at the very beginning, and it's just such a delight. I work with the 10 English school boards of Quebec and continue to do that even in this time of COVID, helping them to work with children who have behavior challenges and using a developmental approach with the children. And so many of Quebec was one of the first school districts to start school in August, actually. And so my team and I presented some of the material that we're going to present this evening. And I've got slides that I'm going to share with you because we really felt that if people could understand what was going on in the emotional world of children, that it would make a big difference in terms of how they were able to welcome the children to their schools. So I'm sharing with you the experience that I've had doing that kind of work. Hannah, Deborah.
Oh, you're muted, Deborah.
Am I going next or Hannah? I can go next. So I'm Deborah MacNamara. Institute. Been doing that, I guess, for about 15 years or so with Gordon, and just they couldn't get rid of me. I love this material so much. I love teaching it and working with it in my family practice as a clinical counselor. Probably it's informed my own parenting the most of all, and understanding that dance with two kids, more sensitive kids actually, with a sensitive mom, 14 and 16 years of age. And you know, my kids were saying, you know, Mom, you're not really you know, you help people, but what do you help them with? Like you don't help them with their physical stuff. You're not like a doctor like that, you know, you're not a real doctor and help people when they get sick. And I said, no, but I help with emotions. That's my job. That's what that I work with. So I love this area, and I think it's just such a new age for emotions now, and trying to understand it and seeing the importance of it. And so I'm just delighted that you're all here and to have this new wonderful team and projects that we can support people more in the same kind of vein.
Great. Hannah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah Beach, and I I've been working in the field of experiential education, and mostly through the arts, but also through nature, and developing programs for schools for about 20 years. So I've been working in classrooms and alongside educators, really looking at how we can look to create ways to channel expression and find spaces for emotion to come out in our young people. And I've worked for 20 years with children as well. So from little ones up to teenagers. Maybe for the past 10 years, I've been more with teens. And it's been absolutely wonderful for me to take this extraordinary material and to apply it in the classroom in really practical ways with educators. And I just feel so excited about it. Yeah, love it. I write a lot. I do a lot of resources for teachers, and I've co-written Reclaiming Our Students with Tamara. And I'm a course facilitator with the Neufeld Institute, and I also have 3 children. In fact, it's my eldest's 28th birthday today. So, so I have 2 adult children, and I have a 12-year-old as well. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here and be part of a group that's bringing people together to gather and create a village around this material and create a place where people can come together to find support and to have that. So we're really excited.
Yeah, I too am just really excited just to be here with Hannah and Eva and Deborah. I also just wanted to acknowledge that there is likely a mix in the crowd tonight. There is, or I should say, depending on what time zone it is, late afternoon, evening, or middle of the night, depending on where you're coming to us from. And mix of parents and teachers. We are gearing more towards educators, but this is all applicable for parents. Mm-hmm. And so just take it to whatever context whether you're coming as a grandmother, as education assistant, as a support staff, as an administrator. This will all be applicable as we explore a little bit around the emotional world of our children and adolescents and how we can come alongside and make a difference. So we'll start with Eva. She's going to kick things off with some slides, and then the rest of us will not be using slides, and then we'll come back all together at the end.
Great. All right. So I'll share my screen here. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we had presented this to our teachers here in Quebec, and I like visuals, and so I think that it's helpful for us to get a sense of what it is that's going on when we're talking about the emotional world of our children and their emotional health. One of the first things, of course, that we always need to now we don't think we need to remind ourselves of, but we just need to state that really our world has shifted. For me, the date that is in my mind is the 12th of March. And on the 12th of March, my world in every respect changed. There's a shift, and I don't think that we're necessarily ever going to go back to the way the world was before. I'm not necessarily seeing that as a bad thing. I've seen some really positive things come out of this shift, and so I think that that we can obviously get through this and work through this and be able to manage this for ourselves and for our children, but recognizing that this shift has happened, and as a result of that shift, there's just waves and waves of emotion. And as Tamara said, you can apply this as a teacher and any of your role that you have in a school, as a parent, but also just for yourselves as educators, because this world of emotion is there in all of us, and COVID has really kind of brought that to the fore and caused these huge waves to happen. For those of you that are in schools, this sentence here just really struck me. Valerie Kaya is a vice principal at St. John's Elementary School at the Riverside School Board here in the Montreal area, just a little bit off the island of Montreal. And we were going back and forth about how we could help her school come back in May. And she wrote, among many other things, this sentence which struck me, that this is not the vision of school we hold in our hearts. and you see the heart and the tear, because we really are having to grieve. Even in March, many of you as teachers already had in your mind, oh, I'm not going to do it like that next year. Oh, I really want to do this next year, but I want to even do it better. You had your whole plans, everything ready to go. You were just moving forward on this wave of experience and knowledge and understanding, and you were just going to apply it each year better and better. And COVID, of course, has changed the way schools look, the way schools act, all the things that are happening. And so it's something that we have to grieve and something that we have to work with. It's something that we have to come around to. And I think some of what we're going to be sharing with you tonight about how to work with the children is also going to be how to work with your own self and with this particular thing that we in education are having to face. One of the big things people are asking, you watch on the TV, all sorts of places, people are saying, oh my goodness, our children are going to have mental health problems, emotional problems. Oh, they're going to be traumatized by COVID. Is that really what's going to happen? Well, not necessarily. And very interestingly, actually, I think overall, and I encourage you to listen to Deborah's leading our children back to school and a number of other things that actually, in some respects, while our children will be affected, it's harder on the adults because they are actually looking to us. The other big question that people say, well, Eva, I'm not a therapist. How can I help a child who comes to school? Don't they need to be seeing a therapist for that? Well, not actually. We can help a lot in school, and Hannah's going to give you all sorts of ideas, and Deborah and Tamara as well, because there's lots we can do. But we have to understand how emotions work. So this is what we need to really focus on. First thing we now know is that emotions need to be felt and to be expressed to preserve healthy functioning and well-being in all of us as human beings. They're supposed to rise up and through our children. Their existence is not a problem, and I'm going to share some of the things that happen, but really they're not a problem. How they're expressed could be a problem, but the actual existence itself isn't. And one of the things we need to understand is we really truly are looking at an iceberg sort of situation. There are behaviors that we are going to see that are going to worry us. Children are going to become anxious. They'll have obsessions and phobias. They'll be worried. They'll be restless. They're compulsive. All sorts of behaviors that we're going to see that really, oh my goodness, oh yes, this is really not going very well. Aggression, self-attack, tantrums, even sarcasm, irritability, foul words. These things are there. Oh my goodness, does my child have an anger problem? Well, no, it's there. Also, we're going to be seeing things like them being oppositional or lethargic or unmotivated or resistant or even depressed. But these are all just behaviors that are the tip of the iceberg. What we really need to focus on is what's underneath. And how can we help what's underneath manifest itself in a way that isn't going to cause so many problems? So one of the first things we need to understand is that in COVID times, we are facing the thing that bothers us the most as human beings, which is facing separation. This is an illness which takes people away from each other. It forced us to do social distancing, possibly illness and even death. And when we face that separation, it is really causes some emotional reactions. What's fascinating, and as Dr. Neufeld tells us, is there are three primary emotions that come from facing separation. And if we focus on those three and a few other instincts and concurrent things that come with it, we pretty well can manage all of the manifestations that I showed you there. So the first one is when we face separation is we go into pursuit. We want to restore proximity. And many of you, if you've just started school, knew that in the first 2 weeks of school, your children were really wanting to please you. And that is beautiful. It's just so much easier to create a connection with a child who wants to restore proximity. And very much so, children were looking forward to coming to school because you as their teachers, you as their educators are important to them. But what we need to realize is that, of course, along with that emotion comes two other big emotions. The first one is alarm, where we're moved to caution to avoid that which alarms. And of course, all of us are thinking about all the ways in which we can keep ourselves safe from the virus. But there's also frustration, because frustration is the emotion that comes when something needs to be changed. And so that emotion which we could name frustration, moves us to affect change and to try and fix the problem. One little thing about these three emotions is that they tend to be very intense and felt one at a time. And so therefore, one of the things I kind of want to alert you to is that for some children, at sometimes they'll be more in the alarm mode, but then all of a sudden the frustration will come out. I remember at the very beginning when I went shopping with my husband, we were very much in alarm mode. And so we did everything everybody told us to do. We stood in line, we washed our hands, we watched the distances. I mean, we really worked hard at keeping ourselves and everybody safe in the store. Well, of course, that's not how I normally do my shopping. And so there was a lot of frustration in me, but I didn't feel it at all until I came home and my poor husband did something wrong and boom, it came out. And he just looked at me, what did I do to deserve that? Well, of course, the alarm was displacing the frustration, but there's lots of frustration there. So we need to remember that there will be times when each of these emotions will express themselves and not to be surprised because they are there when we are living this experience, which is probably the one of the most excruciating ones for us as human beings. And of course, when any emotion comes in, our whole system, like emotion, we're moved, our whole system activates. We have cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, growth hormone. These are all in us. We're very vigilant. We're watching things. Our heart rate goes up. Rest and digest are affected. It says here suspends, and I know that I'm in deep trouble when I can't eat anymore. But also remembering that our digestion might increase simply because we want more adrenaline and cortisol. So if you found you're eating more right now, that's also pretty normal. Heart rate and blood diverts to the muscles. So what happens here is the whole system is getting ready to do something to fix the problem of separation. And it has an action potential that actually seeks expression. It's more like static electricity than anything else. And many of us remember the days when you had to watch about turning on the light switch because there was this bunch of electricity that we didn't even know was gathering in ourselves. And this is the same for emotion. Now, when we are experiencing an emotion, let's say frustration, so when the limbic system or the emotional part of the brain says, do something about that, fix it, something's wrong, the adrenaline and the cortisol are going to motivate us to do that. And the first thing that really needs to happen is we need to become aware of the fact that we're experiencing this sense of something not working. And we call that a feeling. We actually tend to use the words emotion and feeling as if they're the same thing, but feeling is the naming of the emotional experience that's happening in us. And with frustration, it's around, it's not working, or children can say, this is stupid, why can't we fix this? Why can't COVID go away? Anything that indicates to us that the child is sensing that something needs to change and it's not changing is actually them just being in touch with their feelings. And that is not a bad thing. We actually want our children to be able to share with us what's going on inside that internal world. Now, sometimes it gets overwhelming. What's going on in our emotional world gets overwhelming, and certainly around the alarm. The alarm is very overwhelming. And our brain has this capacity to protect us, to just kind of, when it's too much to feel, when it's too much to make sense of those emotions and to acknowledge those emotions, we're able to kind of numb it out. And many of you know that you do that. You maybe have a little argument at home with your family, but you go to school and you act as if everything's okay. And it's only at the end of the day that you, oh my goodness, yes, and you remember what it is that happened, because our brain has this natural capacity which allows us to do our work, to get along with things. And especially from being overwhelmed by that which makes us feel too vulnerable. And actually, if many of you are wondering about some of the behaviors of people out there, you say, how can they ignore COVID? There are people seem to be ignoring COVID. Well, COVID makes us feel too vulnerable. And part of the brain says, I don't want to feel that vulnerability. Or it can make us feel too wounded. So when emotions are expressed, they do need to be expressed, but they're messy and noisy, especially for children. And some of our children sense that this expression of emotion will actually threaten their relationship because sometimes we have a hard time tolerating that, understanding that, working with that. So it can suppress or depress this to protect the attachments. And so one of the things that children need from us is permission, because sometimes we inadvertently say things that we actually try to make things better for children, but the message they get is, this is good. So, oh, please stop crying, honey. You know, calm down. Oh, don't be silly. There's nothing to be afraid of. Why are you crying? Why are you so angry? And sometimes, of course, we even want them to think happy thoughts or to be good. But this can cause the emotions to be suppressed. And that can cause, because the child is afraid that if I say what's in my heart, what I feel, that this will alienate the people that are trying to take care of me. So we do have to be careful that we give space for emotional expression. And of course, what happens here is that when there's so much emotion going on, and again, there's many reasons for this, but all of us are full of emotion right now, frustration, alarm, all sorts of other emotions as well, but those big ones. When we don't have a place for it to be expressed, when we can't acknowledge it, this is actually what stress is about. And for those of you that are working in schools, many of you come at the end of the day, I'm so stressed, because you have not yet allowed that emotion to move through. And when the emotion can't move through, that's where the behaviors come from. That's where the impatience, the abruptness, the rudeness, the irritability, the physical outbursts, the tantrums, and fatigue. Because all that adrenaline and cortisol get used up, and then we get tired, and they can even cause us to be depressed. So some of you recognize the traffic circle, Dr. Neufeld's traffic circle, which allows us, which he shows us sort of visually how frustration can move through our system. The most efficient way for frustration to be dealt with is if we can change something. And obviously, many times we're able to do that. But right now, especially with COVID times, there's not a lot that we can change. That's our wall of futility. Well, if we can't change something, then it needs to change us. And that is the process of adaptation, the process whereby we are changed by that which we cannot change. In order to adapt, though, we need to feel sadness. We need to be able to tolerate vulnerability. It takes time to do that. In the course of a busy day, when there are people around that we're not sure if they're going to make fun of us because we're feeling sad, there are times when we just can't do that. But sadness is really important. We need to allow ourselves to go down deep, deep, deep and to do the grieving, because it isn't until we grieve that we actually bounce back and experience true adaptation, where we can deal with a world that we cannot change, but we are now able to move forward with it. If we don't have the time for that, if that makes us feel too vulnerable, then we don't go down that route at this moment in time. Well, we move around. Now remember, there's all that adrenaline in your system, the cortisol, the whatever, like we want to do something. And very often it comes out in the desire to, in an attack, and sometimes even the desire to hurt. Now, it's possible for us to manage that desire through mixed feelings. And what mixed feelings do is just put us back into the traffic circle so we can either figure out what we can change or give ourselves a chance to adapt. But in this time of COVID, when there is just so much emotion in our system and a lot of frustration in our system, we need to actually make use of something that Dr. Neufeld has called safe eruptions. And we're just going to make it a little bit more sort of visual here and just make it look like a little bit of a release valve, like with a pressure cooker, where we actually allow that emotion to come out, provide opportunities for venting and release. And what we're going to find is that if we can work with emotions and give them space, that they then will find their rightful way of being dealt with. So the challenge that we have is really, when we're dealing with a world full of frustration, is how can we help that emotion to find expression that won't cause more problems? And one of them is through providing ways of venting and releasing. And this is the work that Hannah has done, and will share that with us. We also need to make sure that we create space for sadness and tears. We feel very uncomfortable when children cry because we don't want them to be unhappy. But it's very important that they have a chance to grieve a school that is different, to grieve the fact that they're, they can't hug their teachers, or they can't play as much with their friends as they want. We also need to create for ourselves our own space for sadness and tears. I went for a walk the other night, and I kept having this kind of like stone in the middle of my chest. And then I realized, oh my goodness, you're grieving yet again. You're grieving yet again for all those plans and things that we used to do in education that we can't anymore. You're grieving for the child who now has to sit by himself for a while because there's nobody that he can play with. We have to grieve these things, and we ourselves have to do that. And by the way, I recommend for all adults in education, Find those TV shows, binge watch those shows, create a moment for yourself where you can actually access the tears. Sometimes we need to prime them with a sad movie or with a story, with something that will prime those tears, because it's so incredibly important for us to grieve, because in the process of grief, then we can find other ways through. And the last little thing I just wanted to tantalize you with here is that venting and release and creating space for sadness can seem like hard work, therapeutic work, but there's a whole nother realm that we can also use in helping children deal with their emotional world, and that is through play. But before we go into play, we're going to do a little bit more exploring of our emotional world. So I'll pass it on to Tamara.
Oh, thanks, Eva, for setting the stage there. And I had to laugh because I was thinking about that piece about the alarm and finding some of that room for ourselves. And when you were talking about the Netflix, because I'm going to talk about alarm, but when COVID first started and all the restrictions, and there was so much alarm, but I didn't know what to do with it all. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to watch alarming things on TV. In fact, I avoid them at all costs. But what I found myself starting to do is I started watching Grey's Anatomy, which is all about the emergency room. And every night I would watch sometimes up to 3 episodes at the beginning. And that's where I found my tears. I was able to grieve other people's experiences of loss that were completely unrelated to what was going on right now, although they did have one that came close in terms of pandemic related. But it allowed a place for that to come, because I did not know what to do with all of that alarm. It was so hard to be able to put it into words. And I think if we're experiencing this as adults, how are our children experiencing it? They don't know what to do. They hear these rumors, or they hear, as much as we, maybe try to protect them from certain things, they'll hear things, or they'll wonder about things. And, oh, could this happen to you too? What if this happened? What if this happened to my family? What does this mean? And so all of this, especially our children who are maybe picking up those cues a little bit more, a little bit more sensitive or gifted, where they pick up and they go, oh, wait a minute. I think I have an idea of what could happen. And so that alarm gets triggered. And as Eva was talking about, this alarm that is at the underneath the surface, but sometimes we cannot even be aware of it. There's not a consciousness of it, we're not necessarily feeling that alarm. And it can come out in all these places, as Eva was talking about, the frustration coming out differently. This can come out in trouble focusing. We may not realize. I know that I was particularly scattered at that time when I was just trying to hold it together and present myself as knowing the answers somewhat to my children, when really I didn't know any of the answers, but trying to keep some sense of safety there. And so it could look like trouble focusing. It could look like just agitation. A child who is just, their body is moving, because as Eva's the adrenaline, Eva was talking about the sympathetic nervous system and how that gets activated, and now we're moving to action. But what if we don't actually know why? What if we're not aware of that anymore? What if we don't have that connection to know what it is that it is that's bringing that alarm? Or we just can't face it directly. And so we feel it in our body. And how many of our students were already struggling with this alarm in them that was coming out in this restlessness, this inability to sit still, this constantly looking for where the threat is. Yeah, as someone's writing about it, some of their students tapping, just kind of that restlessness, that the legs moving, my youngest daughter, she had to move all the time. She was constantly in this, a little bit restless, because she had, was dealing with a lot of alarm in her life, a lot of anxiety at that time. And so we can see this when we don't see what it's underlying it. We think it's something unrelated, right? And yet at the bottom of all of this, we may see obsessions and compulsions. We may see the need to do things over and over. The irony here is that the hand washing is a very common obsession. We've got to keep germs away. Our brain, when we're alarmed, our brain lands on something being the problem. And so for many people, that was something that they were already trying to wash their hands and keep themselves safe. And if only I do this, then the rest of the world will be okay, or the rest of my world will be okay. And now we've got this, even more so, this idea that this is what we need to do to keep ourselves safe. So these obsessions and alarm and compulsions can come out even more when that alarm is triggered. And I've seen a lot of phobias start to come out more and more, because phobias are where the brain lands on something as being the threat. So I have a youngest daughter whose brain landed on coyotes being the threat in her world. Her world did not feel safe when she was away from me. And so her brain decided for her that coyotes were the problem. So we may see this in some of our students and our children. All of a sudden, there's these new phobias coming up that don't seem to make sense to us. And yet the brain is trying to make sense of the alarm that is stirred up in us. It's trying to make sense of what is it about? Where's the connection? But the reality is that so much of our alarm we can't put words to. As Eva mentioned earlier, that facing these kinds of separations are too big. We can't go there. The same way that I was watching Grey's Anatomy, to be able to somehow find some place for that alarm to get filtered through. And I actually found my tears that way. Indirectly, I was able to release, to get to that sadness, and maybe not directly to the threat that I was experiencing, but at least I could find my tears for those in that particular show. This is why movies, dramas, there's something about being able to identify in those stories that it allows it to touch in just a way that isn't too much, that isn't too over the top, that isn't too vulnerable. And I know Hannah's going to talk a little bit more about that, and finding some of these places where it can come out in a more natural way, because it's got to come out. We've got to find a way of releasing this somehow. It's got to move. And right now we're almost scared of being scared. We're scared of our own alarm. We want to the whole idea, well, we just need to be calm. Well, the reality is we can't get to calm unless we make room for all of the frustration and the alarm and all the things that are building up in us. We can't get to the other side. And so the challenge here is that we need to find a way for our children to feel safe, to feel emotionally safe, so that their emotions can move, so that we can find a way to bring their alarm system to rest. Because when they can rest, that's where all of a sudden they can digest. They can digest their food. They can digest the information that's coming in. All of a sudden there's more receptiveness to their world. We can't take in when we're in this alarm mode. And when the alarm is at the driver's seat, many of you that have seen the movie Inside Out, and remembering what happens when some of these different, when they had it as fear in the in the movie, when that was in the driver's seat, there's no taking in. I just remember him sitting there like this all the time, and everything's coming from this place of, I gotta stay safe, and that's not how we grow. That's not how we mature. That's not how we learn. We learn from a place of rest. And this is why play is also so important, because it comes from the same place. Play is the place where we can have some movement, where we can actually take some of those feelings and those emotions and give them some space without there being any repercussions, any consequences, any anything that might get in the way or have them get stuck. And so this is why play and what play can look like many things. It's not the way we're maybe traditionally thinking of it, but it's when we can go into that mode where it doesn't count, where it's not about outcome, it's not about getting things right. And I think this is the place in our schools right now where we need to go more into that mode, where we can try to reduce the alarm that they're experiencing in this place of being able to have more room for some exploration, for some playfulness. How do we bring that piece in? And then the other big piece here is when we're trying to look at how we create emotional safety, the kind of emotional safety that will bring our children and students to rest. It's the relationship. It's the connection. It's that attachment. It's when our children and our students are looking to us to lead them, to guide them, to orient them. That's where they feel safe. And we can do that. We can find our way, even if we're feeling a little lost ourselves. As Eva was saying, we got to find a place where we can share those feelings of being lost, but not with our students, not with our children. Right? We can find the place for our tears so that we can hold that space for our children and students who need us to be there for them, guiding them through this alarming time, this frustrating time. More so than ever, they need us. They need that relationship. They need that connection. And so when I think about when they're facing separation, how do we help them face connection instead? How do we help them hold on to us? How do we help them hold on to the relationship? In that, then that alarm can come down a bit. Oh. I think about a story that I love to use when I'm talking about anxiety and alarm, and that idea of holding on. And it's a beautiful story called The Invisible String by Patrice Karst, and a woman from Montreal, actually. And in this story, it's just a simple story, but she tells the story of this child or her two children who get alarmed in the middle of the night. There's a thunderstorm. We just had a huge thunderstorm last night, so I can relate to this. And the kids woke up and they're like, "Oh, mommy, we're scared. We feel like we're alone and we need you." And she said, "Oh, well, don't need to worry because we're always together no matter what." Why? How is that possible? She says, "Well, I've got this invisible string and my mother told me about this when I was about your age." And she's kind of probably just making this up on the spot, right? But that doesn't matter. It's what's needed in the moment. And then she wrote a book about it. But there's this invisible string and it connects everyone that we care about. It connects us all. So you're actually never alone. And it's this idea, and then they go through, well, will this, will it separate? Will we lose it if you're mad at us? No, it won't lose it. Will it be, does it connect me and the cat? Well, yes, if you care about your cat, it does connect you to the cat. And then it gets to this place where it said, what about Uncle Brian in heaven? Will it connect us to him too? And there's this, yes, those, whether they're with us physically or not, or whether the relationship is there forever. And that string, that invisible string connects us. And it's that idea of connection that helps us feel like we're not alone and helps us feel like, oh, okay, we can do this. We can do this. And so that piece is just so important right now, no matter what our role is how do we help our children, our students, keep that connection both with us and with their other teachers, their parents, whoever their important people are, they need to be connected to. And that piece, if we can get that piece where we're constantly helping them face the next point, the next time when they're together, that gives that alarm a chance to come down a bit. And then there's room for those emotions to move. There's room for that for receptiveness to learning. Um, and I just want to just mention the other piece of this emotional safety. When I think of emotional safety, I think of kind of three key things. It's the relationship. It's some kind of rhythm or routine that provides safety too. When you know what you can count on, even if it changes every day. You know, I have, I think I've shared this in other places, that I have this tea time with my girls, and I have one girl home with me right now doing university from home. She's supposed to be in Montreal. And we have a connection time. Every time, every night, say, I will see you for tea at, you know, fill in the blank. This morning it was far too early. It was 6:30 in the morning, I believe. Normally it's a little bit later. It changes from day to day. But the point is that we know the routine ahead of time and we know what to expect. And that helps us both to feel a bit of rest, to know we have our next connection point. So whatever that tea time looks like in your world, it's how do we help them in each of those transitions to hold on. And so that's the rhythm, that's the routine. And then the release. How do we help make room for that? And Hannah's going to talk more to that after Deborah speaks a little bit more on resistance, because that's another thing that comes up a lot right now. And so I think I will leave it there to pass it to Deborah, and then if there's questions that come up, we can handle them after. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Tamara. Made me reminded me how much I love that book, Invisible String. And when I used to travel, I used to tell my kids we'd tuck in our invisible strings in our tummies and they could tug on me. Of course, my very sensitive child said, "Mom, the string will break." And I had to reassure her that my invisible string never broke. You know, it's just another way of talking about alarm. But I get the pleasure of talking about resistance. Resistance and opposition, because everyone else is too resistant to talk about this topic. So they gave it to me because I drew the short straw, and but I'm not resistant about it at all. And it's such an interesting emotion, resistance. You would not think that this would be hardwired into the human being, that it would make no sense to have something, an instinct, which is called counterwill, which I have to say Gordon Neufeld is, other than he got the term from Otto Rank, but really he's the only one who's really brought this to the fore, and understanding this is a very powerful emotion. And he's got a whole course on it if you're fascinated by counterwill. And the instinct is counterwill, and the emotion is resistance and opposition. And so when you feel pushed, you can push back, and you will know this as a teacher, how problematic this is in terms of the work that we do, that this works, this learning business works when our kids are following us and not being resistant to things. But, you know, I was thinking about what would be an example of how we actually are under incredible amounts of restrictions and limitations now, and how it sits sort of at the unconscious level, and it can just flare up. And you can see this in all sorts of different ways, the mask wearing to all sorts of different types of, you know, dialogues that are happening around COVID. But how many of you, just for example, are when you're binge watching Grey's Anatomy or whatever has become your secret pleasure, or now Tamara's not so secret pleasure, how many of you find yourself yelling in your head at people, "Don't touch each other. You're not allowed to do that. Put your mask on. Why are you hugging?" I find myself like in my shows, I'm like, why are they doing this? They're not allowed to do this anymore. And it's like all of a sudden, all of this resistance comes to the surface, and you realize you're just a hair away from feeling coerced, right? Yes. See, everybody is like saying yes. Just it's our experience now of watching what life was before. Now you understand the enormity of what is pressing down on us. Now, can you imagine you are then going to school? Okay. You are going to school and there's new rules, right? How many of you, when they said, okay, whatever you do, don't touch your face, don't touch your face. How many of you wanted to just touch your face like 100 times over, right? And guess what? You as teachers get to be the bearer of all these new rules and restrictions. So do you think we might have some problem with resistance and opposition? You might find that you have some problems with your own resistance and opposition to these things. We got a big problem with resistance and opposition, right? And without some release or expression for this, dynamic. This is incredibly problematic in relationships. The more you see yourself in charge, the more that you are responsible for children, the more it doesn't feel right or natural for a child not to obey you. And so here we are in a school setting with increased layers of emotion and more resistance and opposition. I happen to have two children who have a very healthy instinct when it comes to counter will. Once, Gordon has a slide on counter will in the presentation that, describes what it looks like. They balk and talk back. They're preoccupied with taboos and, they're obstreperous, belligerent, non-compliant. But that obstreperous word is, it's a really good word. It sounds like resistance. And so one time my daughter was saying, no, I'm not going to do that, or talking back or something like that. And I said, you know what, Maddie, if you were a dinosaur, you'd be the Stegosaurus kind. And she looked at me, she said, no, I would not. And I said, that's what I'm talking about, right? It's just that whole pushback, and you can feel it. You can feel it when you've been shoved back. No, I won't. And it's a defensive reaction when you feel pushed and coerced. And we can't, if you can understand that, if you can feel it inside yourself, I think that it can help us not get so triggered by it. Because holy cow, is this a emotion that absolutely makes you back up? You may even find yourself playing devil's advocate and arguing a position that you don't even believe in, because you have actually been triggered by someone's forceful presentation of something. And so this is where we're at now with all the new restrictions and the new rules and things that are changing. And so kids, what are we going to do with this? Because we've got this whole emotion. It's like the elephant in the room. We've got this whole emotion that needs to come out and find a way. And it is also, we got to remember that it is preserving, it's a self-preservative instinct, right? Like when you feel your boundaries are, being diminished, or the sense of self is being eroded, the more immature you are, the more you're going to get a hair trigger reaction to this. So if a child was already quite immature, and they can be 13 and quite immature, they're going to be much more prone to counter will, because the self isn't actually as developed. And so the more immature your kids are, and that isn't just by age, that's psychologically, the more they could be more prone to counter will. Like I had one parent came in and the school kept saying to this guy, please do not climb on the portables at lunchtime. Don't climb on the portables. I've told him 100 times, don't climb on the portables. As soon as the teacher's not looking, he climbs on the portables. What are we going to do to this kid? And I said, well, I think maybe telling him not to climb on the portables would be a good start. Well, but he's not getting it. Yes, and actually the more you say it, the more it's a taboo, the more resistance and opposition he has. Well, what do you think would be the answer here? Probably just supervision at this point with somebody that he cared about, someone that he was attached to. Because as soon as you throw an attachment there, as soon as you want to follow a teacher, as soon as you feel that teacher is, the same as you, like, you just, the defenses or the emotions of resistance are reduced. Why? Because we always want to follow the people that we're attached to. We feel less coerced by the people that we're attached to. Think about the one boss that you had that you'd absolutely disliked. Every time they asked you to do something, you'd probably say yes on the surface, and underneath you're like, yeah, when I get to it. But the boss that you liked and they said, hey, will you do this for me? I know you don't want to, but could you do this? You'd be like, yeah, I'll make that work for you. So attachment is relationship, what's that saying? A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Yeah, this is what we're talking about. The sugar's relationship. You don't have to give them real sugar. You just give them relationship. That is the natural feel good thing. And so relationship's going to be really important when we get to this emotion. The more you can build those relationships with your kids. You think about online teaching and how much resistance and building the relationship there. Some of you are having to do your work over online. We got to get to the relational piece in order to deal with this. I used to, when I started with, I worked, my first job as a teacher was at the Vancouver School Board. It was in an alternate ed environment. So these kids had not made it through high school. And they ranged anywhere from 17 to 24 years of age. And I was terrified to go in a classroom and say, hey, this is what we're going to learn today. Because they were all full of counter will. And so intuitively, this is before I knew Gordon, intuitively I went in there and I just said, well, they're going to have to want to learn this. I'm going to have to kind of bring them along. So I would go in there and I'd say, so here's the deal, guys. They've given me time management to talk to you about today. But I don't know, why is this important to you? Like, we could spend 3 hours doing lots of stuff about time management, but like, why would you care about it? What do you want to know about time management? We can talk about anything here to deal with time management. And they would end up saying, well, I think it's important to me because of this, and I need to know about it for this. And they give me all the reasons why time management was important. And then I'd say, okay, well, okay, these are great ideas. Why don't we do that? And then I'd pull out all my overheads, because yeah, back in the day we had overheads, right? And I'd pull out my overheads, and it was my entire lesson plan. And they never failed to amaze me. Once I did go in there and I had to talk about self-esteem, and I had so much counter will myself about this stupid topic. And I walked in there and they could tell I just didn't want to talk about it. And someone actually stood up in my class and said, why the hell should we sit here for 3 hours and talk about this stupid topic? Like, talk about counter will, right? It was just like right in the middle of it. And I thought, if I lose this entire class, this resistance and opposition, I will go nowhere here. And I said to him, you know, how many years have you been told that you're worthless, kind of thing? And he said, 21 years. And I said, well, will you give me 3 hours then to talk about this? And he said, sure, Deb. And he sat down, and on we went. But it was actually relationship that I think that turned that around for us, because he could see that I cared about him, and he could see that the reasons that I were there, and that he did matter, and that this was something that would be worthwhile. So we have to play with these dynamics that are in our classroom. If we push into it, they're going to, you know, if they're already feeling pushed and full of resistance, and then you push more, what do you think is going to happen? The resistance goes up. And kids who keep feeling pushed keep getting more resistant. And what happens in education is that we dig in and they dig in, and they end up with, you know, esoteric labels like oppositional defiant disorder, whatever it is that we call them, because they're basically not attached, or they're feeling pushed all over the place. And so we've got to bring down the resistance, and we've got to find a way to take care of them. Now, there's many different ways we can do that. And Hannah's going to talk more about some of the strategies. But the things that I would say I have found to work most as an educator is humor. You know, like, okay, I know you all showed up. You dreamed about me last night. Like, you couldn't wait for my lecture. Like, you know, take a number. There's a lineup out the door. Hold on, you know, and they would be laughing at me like, you're crazy, lady. I'm like, I know, you know. And so just some humor sometimes, because what you're doing is you're really playing. You're playing at, you know, releasing the frustration, the resistance, whatever is there. And allowing it to come out sometimes, you know, even with my daughter, you know, and they're schooling right now, they're like, oh, we have to do this and this and this, and, you know, we got to wear our masks. And so coming alongside of that even is a wonderful strategy, and just saying, yes, there's so many new things you have to pay attention to, you know, as if it wasn't bad, you had to pay attention to this. Now you've got this. And I just said no to going out with your friends. And so now you're really upset, and away we go. But yeah, you're feeling pushed around and hemmed in all over the place. And as soon as you start to put words to it, and you have some expression for emotion, the resistance just, it doesn't increase, and it can help to start to work with it a little bit, because, you know, you can't keep forcing this and pretending that it's not there. It just magnifies it and makes it worse. And the other thing, of course, that helps with resistance is just good old structure and routine, so you don't always have to tell them what to do and being so explicit about everything. Put your mask on, put your masks on. I mean, how does a preschool teacher manage, you know, 20 preschoolers? It's just structured routine. All you have to do is start singing a song to preschoolers, you know, the cleanup song, the Barney song, and they all get down to business. It's like, oh, you don't have to go around and tell all of them. So good structure routine, which schools do best, really helps to minimize counter will, resistance and opposition. It's just something we get used to, and you don't feel so pushed around by it when you adapt to it. But it's hard. I think we're in a perfect recipe right now for lots of resistance and opposition, because COVID is actually attacking the freedoms that we've come to know and come to expect. There's all sorts of disappointment about it. It's going to show up in our classroom. I think we have to expect it. We have to name it. We have to have some fun with it. You know, yeah, and find a way through it, and not to be afraid to stop from the work and the outcomes that drive you, and focus on the emotions. Because if you don't gather them at this place of resistance and this emotion and let it have some space, it absolutely will take over your classroom, and everyone's going to go. You're going to get stuck in the muck. So, you know, if you if you have to have 5 minutes to touch your face and then hand sanitize, go for it if it's allowed. Like, you know, when I get this mask off, you know, I'm going to go home and kiss everybody. Like, you know, whatever the games you have to play or some sort of expression for it. But man, oh man, you've got to absolutely let the steam out of this one, because it will hijack everything in a classroom. It can be a fun emotion to play with if you can find your way through. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah now, because she's got all the answers for you.
Oh, no pressure at all.
Resistance.
Thanks so much, Deb. Yes, so emotion. So one of the things I want to talk about is a little bit about what was even happening even before COVID. So when we were looking at kids coming into our classrooms, when kids are arriving to us, even before, we were seeing an epidemic of anxiety and aggression increasing and resistance increasing. And I think there's something that we really need to be aware of as educators in terms of understanding what's sort of happening. We're not going to go into it in a big way right now, but just a little bit so that we can look at some of what we can do in our classrooms to help. And one of the things that we have to remember is in our culture, overall, we have replaced play with entertainment. Now, it's not that there's anything wrong per se with entertainment. We were just talking about entertainment. All of us, you know, a little bit of entertainment, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not the same thing as play. And many children, and all of us as adults as well, we have lost the place where we were digesting much of what was stirred up inside of us. Play was that place. Many of us have had more void moments, more of those empty times in our life where even if you were just sitting in a car watching the telephone poles, like counting as you're driving, or sitting at a bus stop, just, I don't know, just thinking your thoughts, just sitting there, not looking at your phone. Most children have lost these times. And this has absolutely huge consequences on how they're entering our classrooms. So we need to be aware that not only now are we having heightened, stirred up children because of COVID, we have heightened alarm, heightened resistance, heightened frustration. Many children have lost a lot of the places where that would have naturally been more able to be digested, which is what would have happened through play, which is what would have happened in some of those quiet void moments, which become that fertile grounds which play takes root. And so what's happening for educators, if you imagine this is so challenging. As families, that can be challenging because you might have 1, 2, 3 children. Educators are having tons of them coming in. All of a sudden, we're having all these children arrive who are filled up to here, and not filled in a good way, overfilled in a way where they haven't been able to digest what has been entering their systems. There's been no release for what has been stirred up inside of them, and they're coming to us. And so we need to expect that kids are arriving stirred up. We need to think, oh, I wonder if they're going to be, we have to be knowing they are coming more stirred up. And therefore we need to make a plan for what to do with that emotion. They are coming stirred up, and we need to make a plan for what to do with that emotion. And a couple things that were brought up both by everyone here was the idea of rhythm. And rhythm is huge, because the thing about rhythm is that it does lower resistance because you know what to expect, but it also creates a structure, like a framework that you can lean on. It provides familiarity, something that you can get used to. And one of the wonderful things about rhythm and release, and when you put those together, is that it becomes more natural because you become used to it. So in terms of looking originally at aggression, let's look at the emotion of frustration. I would think, okay, I have kids that are going to be showing up, with a lot of frustration, energy, and I'm going to make a plan to get this out every day. I'm not going to tell kids that, because they'll think that's really weird. If I say, oh, you're going to have a lot of frustration and I'm going to help you get it out, they're going to be like, yeah, no, that's a no for me. Like, that's just totally weird. I don't tell kids, because then it feels like work, sort of like I'm doing it on purpose. Instead, I just might call it an activity, or might have an art activity or a body break, or we're just going to go outside for a bit, or we're going to do this fun little neat thing I did, and that's it. But I never tell them it's good for them, because all of a sudden then it becomes work, not play. Yeah, so I just keep that in my own little pocket. But I come up with some really simple things. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas. So let's just look at aggression for a moment. One of the things that I'm going to come up with a sort of general ideas and then more specific activities. General ideas that you can do, whether you're at home or school, is you can paper your desk. You can paper every child's desk fully covered in paper. And that way, whenever they have that little tapping thing that goes for some kids and their energies like this, they can just doodle. And you can encourage it. You can tell them, I papered your desk, so that whenever you feel like it, you can just doodle. While I'm talking, while I'm reading, whatever's going on, you can get that out with doodling. At home, when we were on lockdown, I papered my entire dining room table. And I didn't want to make it a project, because I knew if I called my 12-year-old and said, hey, we're going to do this really neat art project, and I've got art supplies out, he'd be like, I don't really feel like doing an art project, Mom. So I didn't say anything about it being an art project. I just covered the table with paper. He just came to the table one morning, and there it was, covered up, and I had markers out, and I just doodle. Well, I can tell you everybody in the family was doodling. People were drawing pictures, people were drawing ugly things, people were drawing all sorts of weird things, and everyone was covering the table, and I would just change the paper once a week. And we're not using it anymore, but I'll bring it back out if I need to. So this is sort of things, whether it's on your desk or whether it's at the dining room table, it's a really easy way without calling attention to it. You're providing a platform to get a little bit of what's inside on the outside, just a little bit of movement there. The other thing in terms of a general idea is playing music as a backdrop to any experience. Music has this extraordinary way of, without even you knowing what's going on, tapping into what you're feeling. Music therapists, one of the things that drive music therapists absolutely bonkers is when people say to music therapists, oh, so do you play Pachelbel Canon a lot to calm the kids? And music therapists literally, like, they pull their hair out when they hear this, because it's the opposite. We never try and blanket. We never try and blanket the emotion. It's always the opposite. We always try to match a child's internal world, because when you match their internal world, what happens is sort of like this, without words, is an unknowing thing. It's like someone gets you. It's like the music felt like you were feeling, and you feel seen or you feel heard. And that's why, if you look at teen music, they're often drawn, because there's so much more turmoil, they're often drawn to more rap, heavy metal, angst, a lot of music that has a lot more strength to it. And so usually, if we can match an internal world, children actually can kind of have it's a big out breath, because someone saw. They were able to have that feeling match, and it kind of helps them get it out. One of the things, though, if you're playing music as a backdrop to try and kind of help release some emotion, you always have to have an activity to channel it. Like, for example, if the kids are taking off their coats, you're not putting on heavy metal, because that's just going to be complete chaos in the classroom. So you always think, okay, I need somewhere for whatever's coming out to go somewhere. So I need to make a box around it. It needs to have a start and an end. It needs to have a channel. So I'm going to do this while they're doing a writing exercise, or while they're doing a drawing exercise. And I might transition it, because you never know what a child's internal world is. I tend to play 2 or 3 pieces of music. I might put something on, like some intense Carmina Burana opera or something, and then transition to something more melancholy. I have a fantastic melancholy playlist. In fact, if you Google melancholy playlists on YouTube, there's amazing music, and I use a lot of it. When I sense, and if I'm working in the classroom and I'm sensing everyone's just kind of like, and there's people are like doing this on their desk, and they're doing this, and they're all over the place, I don't say, hey, everybody calm down. I just think, everybody needs a little bit of melancholy music right now or something. And I'll just play something and kind of watch an energy shift there. So that's another general idea. Reading stories also is a really wonderful emotional playground. When we read stories to kids, they can hear the nuance of emotion in the reader's voice. And if they're attached to you, it's just magical, absolutely magical, because they can hear the crack in your voice if you're feeling emotion. They can feel your excitement. They can go on the journey as far as their imagination lets them go as well, but they're going on the journey with you, sort of like going on a hiking journey or something, but they're being led by you as their teacher. They're being led through their imagination, and it can be a really incredible experience. In terms of looking specifically at getting the emotion of frustration out, there's tons of ideas. And Tamara and I, in our guide, we have a 60-page resource guide with our book that's filled with ideas for educators for kids of all ages, from pre-K to grade 12. But in terms of aggression, scribbling to music is absolutely fantastic. So one of the things I suggest is putting on really intense music. I like to use like the Final Countdown, I don't know if you know that. And I use a Russian live band that does it, and they're like rockers. So as they're playing their electric cellos, they're all going like bang, bang, bang with their heads. And the music is really intense. And what I do is I put the music on and I yell freeze about every 5, 6, 7 like random seconds. So people have to scribble. So the rule is you have to scribble until you hear no music. You're not allowed to stop. Absolutely no stopping until the music stops. And I just keep on doing it off and on, freeze, stop, freeze, stop. And it's a really amazing thing. It doesn't work the same way without the music, because what the music does is that it helps direct more emotional energy into the experience than it would if you didn't use music. So it's kind of fun. Kids laugh. They think it's weird. They laugh at me while I'm doing it. I do it with them. And it's something we do together as a learning community. It's something that we embark on together. It's not about me saying, I would like you to all learn to scribble now while I watch you scribble. It's building a culture of enjoyment and building relationship through having activities that you're joining in. And sometimes the kids think, I'm weird or I'm funny, but I laugh at myself about it too. And it's something, yeah, we all just need to get out a little body break right now. We all just need to do this little thing. And it's a really fun activity. The other activity that I've been finding kids really interested in right now, and this is up on our Idea Center in the editorial section, I wrote this up, is called the Frustration Monster. And this is a great one for a lot of kids who are experiencing resistance, kids are often asked to draw really pretty pictures. Oh, it's so beautiful, it's so lovely. And this gives them permission to do the exact opposite. So you ask everybody to draw the ugliest monster they can possibly imagine, and you want it to be so ugly, like you just have to say, no, even uglier, like honestly, I want as ugly as you could possibly make it. And for a lot of kids, this is such a freeing experience, and so we call those our frustration monsters. And different classes do different things with them. Some classrooms have a gallery of their frustration monsters and they put them all up. Other classes have a shredder, and they're all allowed to shred their frustration monsters or crumple them up and recycle them. Whatever feels right for you. Some people love that. It's like, I get to make this art and now I get to like scrunch it and just like use it into like a basketball hoop or something throw it away. And for older kids, there's different things that you can do. One of the things I think that Eva's touched upon this was the idea of how often we encourage people to have really positive thoughts. Oh, we should be, think really positively. But often there's not room for that positivity to come if there isn't room to get the other out. So if you have a what bugs you wall, like have a big, huge white piece of paper on the wall or a big banner, then everyone can just jot it down. It's not mandatory. Otherwise it feels like work. Just, hey, if you want to write what bugs you wall, go for it. You can also have a gratitude wall and an awesome wall. That's fine. But you're probably not going to get as much on there if you don't have a what bugs you wall. And then what bugs you wall for teens is awesome. And they love to tell you what bugs them. They just love it. So the only rule most teachers that I work with have is that you can't put a person's name on it. Other than that, go for it. Just, you can't write so-and-so. Other than that, write what bugs you. And they just love it because often they're not asked. They're often asked just to be positive. And when you can get out of, get it out. This is what bugs me. It bugs me that I have to do this. It bugs me that I can't even be in the class with my friend. It bugs me that I have to wear this stupid mask. It bugs me that and people, these walls are getting filled up, and there's more room to actually. I have was doing this with my son the other day, and he's like, well, Mom, but I also like so and so. I also like this, because he was able to say he likes this because he was able to say this bugs me. And we need to be able to create room for both, and become a culture that is often trying to blanket the emotion our kids are feeling. And there's as Eva was saying, that emotion and feeling aren't the same thing. Feelings are the conscious feedback of emotion, and that emotion is driving us. But it's the feelings. We need to be able to feel our feelings, and we need to be able to give kids a safe space to feel their feelings. And one of those safe spaces, as everyone said here, is us. And the other place is that it can be play. And these activities or arts or all these things are a form of play. Play is when we have movement inside ourselves. All play means is that there's some movement coming from inside to outside. And so we need to create these safe places for kids to be able to feel their feelings, whether it's through scribbling, drawing frustration monsters, being connected to us, letting out what bugs them, and so that they're actually being authentic to their emotions. And so that, that's what will build their resilience and build their maturity. Yeah. So, Tamara.
Thank you, Hannah. I was just reminding me of, some people are commenting about the what bugs me, saying they write a gratitude journal, but maybe it needs to start with a what bugs me page in order to feel more grateful. I always match the two. I have what's working, what's not working, but I start with what's not working. And then I can go to what's working. And especially even better when I can have a little bit of, sit with the disappointment of what's actually not working to be able to make room for what is. Well, we're going to take some time for some questions. I've got some questions in here in the Q&A, so I'm going to start with a couple of those. And so I want to start with a question about how you can create a connection, particularly with small children when they have to be social distancing, the 2 meters away and whatnot. How do you communicate that? Perhaps I'm leading with the way I'm asking this question. How do you create that kind of connection? And I don't know if there's one of you that wants to start off with that.
Well, I think that, especially with younger kids, play is their language. So anytime you introduce any kind of playful thing, obviously singing's not ideal because of the COVID business. So we have to adapt a little bit, but they love stories. Young children love to hear stories. I knew one of my kids' teachers, he would just always start, he had a new baby. And a new baby. We didn't have an old baby. He had a baby, and he would tell stories about what the baby would do, or what the dog did, or whatever like that. And the kids just love to come and listen to what the about all the silly things that this baby was doing, and how they ate blueberries, and you might put a picture up or something. And, it was just a way to connect with the kids in a playful way, because that's the language they speak. And so, I think the thing is, sometimes as teachers, we think, oh, you see teachers doing all these, funny handshakes or these jokes, and they're funny. And some of us we're just not funny, and we shouldn't try to be funny. And we should just try to be whatever it is that we are, and to tell a nice story. One of my friends, she has a moment to meditate in the morning, and that's her thing. She gathers her kids that way. But just some sort of collecting exercises that puts the focus on, saying their name, talking about what's relevant. I miss seeing you, and I was thinking about you with a big thunderstorm. Did anyone hear that? And just finding some point of commonality and playing. I think that would matter the most. Last comment I would make is that when I remember back to being a child, and when a teacher would come near me or they'd say my name, it's just kind of in my body now that I would freeze and think I'd done something wrong, even though I was a very good kid. It was like when I was called upon, it was this sense that I had done something wrong or I needed correction. What would that look like for kids if when they were called upon or their name was used, it was in a collecting kind of way? I actually think we'd be farther ahead in building relationships if that was when we, for every time we had to correct them, we were calling on them another 2 times. So I think it's just sort of that mindset that I would approach this idea of building relationship.
And I mean, that's one of the things we need to grieve, is that we had our simple ways of doing it. We knew by a touch, by getting close, by the huge smile on our face. Those were simple, easy ways for us to make those connections. And but that doesn't mean to say that children aren't looking for the signs of, am I important to you? Do I matter to you? And I think if there's one thing COVID has done for us, it has caused us, and just that question itself says to me already, a shift is happening in people's minds, because what we used to take for granted, you're not taking for granted anymore. You're saying, how do I do this critical, important thing? Well, the smile in your eyes, the way your shoulders are down, just leaning towards, also, and kids all, 85% of human communication is nonverbal. We can communicate caring to children, which will then increase their attachment to us, but we need to slow everything down and make that our focus.
And I was in a working with a kindergarten class last week, and one of the things that I just saw that was so lovely was teachers talking out what they wish. Oh, I wish I could give you a hug right now. And so they were giving the hug, and so let's give each other a hug like this. And so they're articulating and creating a framework for what they can do. Oh my goodness, I just, if I could hug you right now, I would be right there. And so they're coming up with really creative ways. So people are doing it like this. This is my hug. This is my hug. Whatever it is, people are miming new types of hugs because we're hardwired for connection. We're going to come up with new ways of hugging if it doesn't mean touching. And I'm loving all the ways that teachers are coming up with new ways to hug and saying it out loud. I'm giving you a hug right now. It's not the same, but the kid, they feel that warmth in their voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this question is related to this, but just on the idea of teaching online, how do we do this? And I'll just maybe speak to that one for a minute, because I had to convert to teaching a lot of my courses that I do in person online. And I think the challenge is still there. We have to find a way to collect. We have to find a way. I built in more ways of interacting online. I think what a lot of teachers tried to do when this first started and they tried to teach online is they tried to teach, when really the best thing and to use that technology for was to make the connection. And I know for my nephew, who was 7 at the time, when his teacher, he would get so excited to be able to see his teacher. And the rest of the learning could actually happen not in that moment. It was just having that connection with the teacher. So how do we facilitate both? Some of you that are doing older grades and you're needing to do some curriculum, and to do that is to make room for that connection somehow. How do we collect them? How do we add play in? I've seen with my daughter's university, or first year university, they've brought some play and some games into it to try to ease what they know is really difficult. I mean, try having Frosh Week online. It's not the same. But they had a murder mystery, and they all had to dress up, and they all dressed in character, and she actually had a great time because they tried to find a way to bring that in. So okay, I will go to another question. One about helping a child with anxiety. And again, this is particularly a young child where you've tried some things. There's like the kissing hand, the way the putting notes in their lunchbox. You've tried some of these ideas for helping them hold on, but they're still they're overwhelmed by the day. And so what other things can we do? And I'll just maybe say one, and then I'll pass it on to the rest of you. But what came to mind for me is that sometimes we've got to get other people on board here. Is there some matchmaking? Can you talk to the teacher? Or is there someone else in the class where they can check in and be kind of a home away from home for that child who's just needs a little bit more? I think we forget that we can do this as a team, that we're not meant to do this on our own. And so how can we facilitate that? I don't know if you have any more ideas that you want to throw out there.
Well, I just keep reminding people, and again, each province did it differently and each system did it differently, but we, even here in Quebec, we're only in our 4th week. Like, we're not that far ahead. We're used to doing things more quickly. So, I mean, I think in BC, you guys are only a couple of weeks in. So of course, a child is going to feel uncertain about going. And yes, so if you can match make and take a pic, do it both ways, have the picture of the teacher at home so the child can start thinking about the teacher and seeing that teacher as being the answer when they get to school. And again, of course, the hard thing is that as educators and adults ourselves, we have worry and concern. So we're not the most relaxed people that we can be. And so we need to build that connection and have the child bring the teacher home so they can then go back to that teacher.
Yeah, I think the more personalized we can get, the better. And that's the thing, especially with online and the masks and everything that's removing us. We're losing a lot of our personalized kind of invitations for relationship. And so how do we bring that back into the equation? How do we make that extra effort to reach across the things that are dividing us? As my daughter does online tutoring for French, and my kids and they're teens, right? So 14 and 16, they hate online. They hate this whole, sitting here, and you can just see their whole demeanor. But there was this one particular tutor that has just been so successful with my eldest. And I said, what is it about her? Like, what is it? Oh, she's the best. I can learn online with her. And I said, what is it? Well, first of all, it's one-on-one. So I said, just spend the first half an hour, please, just getting to know her. And they did. She spent half an hour with her. What are you reading? What do you like? And she said, Mom, we talk about books and then we get down to business. And I learn from her. She likes her. That's the whole point. She said to me, she doesn't have any more special knowledge on French than any of my other tutors did, but I just like her. We read the same things. I feel like I'm kind of talking to someone who's similar to me. And I think that's really what we're going to have to do, especially if online stuff and our learning is mediated, is how do we put the extra personal invitation that gets around the things. And we can do that. Sameness is a wonderful way in finding out what their interests are and engaging them on that level. You feel closer as a result. So I think we can figure it out. I think we can figure this out.
I agree. It's just even using people's names more online than not using their names. Sharing pets, sharing just the things that really build a relationship. And I mean, relationship before rigor. And I mean, that's just right now, that's sort of the way we got to go. And also just being mindful that for many people, I look at a lot of the students that I work with, having a window into their home is very stressful for them. And so that's alarming in itself. And so for a lot of the students I work with, it's how do I make them feel safe with me seeing into their home as well? And we have to, there's a lot of alarming things for a lot of students. And so it's like, how do we be okay with, it's okay if it's dark in your room, or if the lights, or if they don't have their screen on, or whatever it is. How do we help each student feel safe with whatever that is for them, so that they can be, that we know we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that emotional safety, and I know we've just got a few minutes left, so we won't be able to get to all of the questions there, although I know some our amazing team, support team has been here answering a lot of the questions as we go. But I just made me think of a couple questions that came up around, what about the child who's shut down? What about the child who just doesn't have, they're very quiet, they've actually withdrawn. And I think about that safety, that how do we make it safe? We can't force a child to let down that guard or to have stuff come out. We can't force that at all. But how do we make it safe? How do we set up the kind of conditions that child can feel safe with us? And I think those two places, through the relationship and through finding some kind of outlet that's indirect, whether it's through animals, through art, through music, through nature. Nature's an incredible one too, that it is these places where we can try to facilitate that to come out when it's safe. And yeah, so I know did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to very, very quickly as well. Very often, the power of being in a classroom is we can say to a child who's less, like there's some children you start talking to them and they just shut down. But if you just say to the child next to them, you know, it's kind of scary right now, and oh, you're just what, you know, like to a child who doesn't mind that being said to them, the other child can hear all of the words of comfort, all the words of support, all the words of coming alongside the child who's 2 children down. Is often very reassuring for the child who wouldn't even dare tell you that. That's one of the powers we have in a classroom, is we can say things to the group that we wouldn't be able to say to an individual child. So I think we need to continually just, and again, this is why bringing the emotion to the fore, talking about it's scary. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's frustrating. Yeah, you don't feel like doing stuff. You know, just saying that. I mean, we had very quickly, we had a group of students that just were doing everything right, but not doing any of their work. And I said, well, it's because they just don't have the energy left. And I said, just talk to them about not feeling like doing work. Teacher wrote me back, said, oh, it was like magic. Anyway, I know we're at the very, very end. So just
do you want to share your screen? Because I just want to, a lot of people have been asking about resources and where they can find things. And I think we have a slide here that Eva's made that we can just to highlight here. So the Idea Center for Educators, this is the website here where you can find a lot of these things. This is a combination of things. The top part is the homepage, and we'll be featuring different recordings, this one has the webinar on it. Deborah's leading our Kids Back to School that was done for parents in May for a group in Montreal that she's made available. Hannah and I have been doing a professional development series. We just started this week that we're meeting weekly on Tuesdays, going through different themes on emotional health. And I know a couple of people are here that are part of that group. So you're welcome to join in, jump in and join us. We're doing 12, but you can sign on for any 1, 3, all of them. It's up to you. We have a whole bunch of resources on their presentations and workshops. That's if you want to have one of us come and do a presentation workshop, there's a link for that. All of the courses through the Neufeld Institute that are applicable, well, all of them really are applicable to educators, but we have some specific ones that we've written about there as well. Opportunities for consultations if you'd like. Eva's also highlighted the resource section here. So we have articles and editorials, lists of children's books, some for home education for those that are interested in that as well. So you can come and explore. We're expanding it. This is just the beginning. We're exploring that. I know that there's also some webinars. I was thinking too about the one that Hannah and I did on creating playgrounds for emotional expression. That's a free resource on the Neufeld Institute site that is in the resources for the pandemic. There are some panels that were related to the pandemic that Deborah and Gordon Neufeld and I have done, and those are available there. Eva's got some wonderful recordings as well that she's done for her school district. So there's a lot of resources there. We'll be posting this recording on this page, so you feel free to share this with others. If you're wanting to share that with someone else, we are freeing this up to be a public resource, and it will go where the link to the webinar is now on the Idea Center. So by next week that will be up and you'll be able to get access to the recording that way. Is anything else?
I think our time is up.
I think that's it. I think we're there. Yeah. And those that were asking about the book, you can also go to our website, the Reclaiming Our Students website as well, for information on getting that activity guide and yeah, or follow up through that way. Okay, anything else that you want to add? It's just been, this has gone really fast. At least it feels like it's gone fast.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Yeah.
A lot of people. Yeah, thank you so much. And we look forward to connecting with you again.
Yeah. So we hope to have some future webinars too, featuring some of the some amazing stories of educators who have been putting this into practice. So we'll hope to bring some more of that to you as well. So all the best to you in your beginnings, this difficult, tricky time.